Some of the information in this video is based on personal predictions and educated assumptions. Please keep this in mind when making important purchasing decisions. Whew! Now, enjoy the video.
Okay, we're not going to waste any time. I'm going to give you the answer to the title of this video, the RX100. Should you wait for the 8? And the answer is, I don't think so. Because if you decide to, you might be waiting a very long time, even longer than you've waited, or maybe even forever. Let me explain why. Let's go through the history of the RX100 camera from the very first to where we are now. Now, I want you to take a look at this chart. It's very interesting.
Since its original introduction in 2012, Sony released a successor model just about every year till 2019. We've been sitting around twiddling our thumbs just waiting. Similar story with Sony's RX10 line, the last model, the RX10 IV, released in 2017. So what gives? These are popular cameras. Recently we saw a wild rumor that there might be a new RX full frame model in 2024, but that's a over $3,000 camera with a fixed lens. So is this all about money? Why do we really have this delay? Sony may have decided at their board meetings that it just doesn't pay to continue with this line. They're going to focus on their more expensive cameras.
Speaking of expensive cameras, we're going to compare this little RX100 to the bigger brother RX10 IV. Now, they both have 1-inch sensors, so just for giggles, let's see how this little guy can do against the bigger guy.
We will get to that test shortly, but is the Mark VII a good choice even if the 8 doesn't come out? Throughout this video, you're going to see pictures and videos taken from this camera. This is a full review of the camera, including many features not normally talked about. And so you'll be able to decide if this camera justifies its high price tag. Kind of eye-opening.
Does this camera deserve its spot in the top 10 selling cameras? I mean, can something this small be that good? Does size matter?
With all the crime today, to me, having a small camera means you can be discreet and not be noticed and stay out of people's way, but still get great shots.
Let's test it now on a photo shoot with our beautiful model Valentina, and we'll use various focal ranges to test the sharpness of a lens. Also pay attention to the bokeh or background blur that this little camera is capable of producing.
It's a nice shot. Very nice. If you want a high-quality compact camera with a 1-inch sensor, there's the Sony, but what else is there? Well, Canon has a G5X Mark II, which is very similar in design with a pop-up viewfinder, but that camera has been discontinued.
I actually do have this camera. Well, as you can see, I do. And if there's any interest, let me know in the comment section and I can do a review of it and or compare it with the RX100 directly.
And while you're at it, please do hit that subscribe and like button, as it does help this growing channel. Back to the competition, Panasonic's ZS200 actually has a longer zoom than the Sony at 360mm, but at the price of a slower aperture, which means the RX100 lens can gather more light. That will result in better low light performance. The Panasonic ZS100 has a little less zoom than the 200, a little faster aperture than the 200, but like both of them, they have fixed LCD screens.
And it has a little viewfinder so you can
Does it have a thing in the back? Can I see?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
And that thing in the back flips all the way up, enabling you to take selfies or vlog. And unlike the prior models, you just have to press once and the viewfinder pops up and is ready to use. The Panasonic's viewfinder, you don't have to pop up, it's always active. The Canon's, you do have to pop up, but the big difference among these three is the autofocus, the Sony using the better phase detect system. So even though this camera is on the older side, the autofocus is still cutting edge. But let's stress the autofocus right now using our model, having her walk fast, and see if the camera can keep up. And you can tell by these shots, which are all JPEGs, straight from camera, no processing. It does a good job of holding the focus on her face. Even when she's blinking, it stays in focus. Now let's test it in video. Will it keep the focus walking in 4K 30 video?
Good.
And you can see it is still keeping the focus. Even when she comes right up to the lens, it stays sharp.
Excellent.
And notice in this example here how it's focused on the background, and then when it detects her face, that face detect kicks in right there and a nice smooth transition. The RX100 tends to get higher ratings online than the comparable Panasonic models, in large part because of the more reliable autofocus. The eye autofocus feature works for animals as well as humans. Tracking is also available in video mode once you've engaged the touch tracking in the menus.
Blah, 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 blah.
You're right, enough techno speak. Let's see how the RX100 compares against the RX10 IV. Two shots, side by side, except you don't know which is which. That's one camera, here is the other. Any ideas? Yep, this is the RX100 Mark VII. Now, if we crop in a little bit, the differences become more apparent. Now we go back to the RX10. Do you see the RX10 is sharper, more poppier, but you have to pay for that difference in dollars and in weight. The RX is 3 times as heavy. Let's check out a 50mm focal length if we see a similar difference. And I would say yes, the RX10 Mark IV still retains that sharpness difference. What about in low light? We're going to test both here in the city off my terrace. Both have 1-inch sensors. Both have relatively fast apertures. So we'll test them both at 200mm. Here is the RX100. And now we're going to test the RX10 with the same scene. As expected, there's not much of a brightness difference. But if you look again, I'm still seeing a similar sharpness difference. It almost looks like there's a haze being lifted when you go to the RX10 Mark IV. See if you can figure out which camera is which here, another night scene. And the hint is what just looks crisper and sharper. And yeah, this is the RX100 Mark VII, and here is the RX10 Mark IV. But not really a fair test, that was just for comparison purposes. But is the lens sharp enough that we can crop into this guy's tablet and start reading? Let's do it. And meditation, a vehicle toward the lofty goals for which our mind, born of our much too concrete brain, too sticky, too soft, cracking under its own weight, is searching feverishly, longingly, forever.
What does that mean?
I don't actually know, but the sensor can produce images that look like this. You can shoot HDR video in 4K, but if you just want to shoot 4K casually, like I did right here, you get beautiful results. If you prefer to shoot in 1080p, you can do that as well, up to 60 frames per second. Your image will be cropped in about 1.19 times more in 4K. And this is showing you an example at 200mm full zoom in 1080p. You can see the slight additional crop in 4K 30. 200mm is not enough of a zoom? Well, then go into clear image zoom. With minimal loss in quality, you get in tighter. Full optical zoom. This is full optical zoom in 4K. And there we've got full clear image zoom. Let's check the stabilization at full zoom. 4K stabilization at full zoom, 1080/60.
Sorry about that wind noise, which actually brings up a good question. Can you hook up an external mic to the camera? And the answer is yes, you can, with 2 caveats. There's no hot shoe, So you have to wind up using like a rig like this, which is not that elegant and sort of takes away from the smallness of the camera. And there's no headphone out as well. So you've got a mic jack, but no headphone jack. So it's kind of like being half pregnant.
We're pregnant, you half-wit.
But fortunately, there are audio level meters, so that does help you monitor your audio even though you can't hear it exactly through the headphones. Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3.
Vloggers will want to see how smooth the camera looks when you're walking. How good does the stabilization smooth things out? And here you can see I'm walking at kind of a brisk pace here, and it's kind of bumpy. It's not like a gimbal, that's for sure. Well, maybe it's not great for walking. What about for birding?
I was really lucky to get this cooperative bird. Yeah, I'm lucky here. Yee. Oh wait, it's part of a Halloween decoration.
So now let's go from the birds to the bees.
You know about the birds and the bees and...
Well, the small sensor allows this camera to have near macro capabilities, so you can get shots like this.
A little slow.
So what other tricks does this camera have up its sleeve? The camera offers a range of picture profiles, so if you're into grading your video, you have that option. But if you also want to be simple, and if your goal is just to shoot 4K video out of the box, you can do that. The camera has a fast processor, allowing for blackout-free shooting and 20 frames per second burst shooting, and it's very easy to set up in the menu. You have high, medium, and low. Just realize it does take a few seconds after you shoot the burst to write to the card. So you're going to be waiting around, so if you need to shoot another burst sequence, you need to be aware of this. In the single burst shooting mode, you can shoot up to 90 frames per second, up to 7 photos, which is great if you really need to freeze something really specifically like a sports scene. Again, very easy to access through the drive menu. Now you only get up to 7 pictures, so it's not a lot, but 90 frames per second is an incredible number, and most people don't realize this camera is capable of that. The RX100 Mark VII brings back the time-lapse feature. Just realize one thing, while the camera has an interpolometer, which means you can set it up to take a series of time-lapse photos, when all is done, you're not going to find a time-lapse created movie anywhere. It's just going to be individual photos like this on your SD card. Unfortunately, the camera doesn't string them all together into a movie like other cameras do, but you can preview how it will look, interestingly enough, but you still need an app or nonlinear editing program to put it all together. Sony offers 120 frames per second in 1080p, so you can make that into a nice slow motion sequence, and it shoots it with sound as well, as I demonstrate here shooting the traffic.
With sound, this is 120 frames per second.
Having it with sound is nice because in case you decide you don't want to slow it down, you still have a usable video clip.
This is recording in 120 frames.
Now, to do dedicated slow motion, Sony calls this HFR, with 3 slow motion speeds, which give you a trade-off between quality and speed. And in the menu, it will tell you the slow motion speed, like it says 4 times slow motion if you're at 240 frames per second, etc. Now, I thought with Valentina's long flowing hair, a good demonstration might be to see her hair move in slow motion. So let's try it first at 240 frames per second, which is the best quality slow motion. Nice and smooth, still sharp, quality, very usable. Now at 480, we can't say the same thing. Look in the background at the trees. A lot of distractions, a lot of video artifacts. The motion is slower, so if you really want to slow things down more, this is the speed, but you're definitely taking a quality hit. And now at the slowest speed, 960, the image really crops in and it doesn't even look like HD anymore. This is more like standard definition and bad standard definition. But it is the slowest speed, and if you're doing something maybe for a science experiment or something and you really need this, but otherwise I really don't recommend it. You can see the effect back in slow motion, and we did get a chuckle out of seeing Valentina's hair fly through the air in slow motion. By the way, this really looks funny when you do it in reverse. The camera can't do this, I did it on my own. So let's look at the pros and cons of the RX100 Mark VII. Should you get this camera? Well, It's got an incredible zoom range, 24 to 200 millimeters in such a small body. Long zooms on full-frame cameras are really big and heavy. I shot this, by the way, with the RX100. It has a nice built-in pop-up flash for fill light, which is really nice even outdoors. The camera gives you the option to customize buttons and dials, so it's more like a professional camera. I often use the front control ring for exposure, since I find myself adjusting that quite frequently. The autofocus is fast, reliable, confident, and I can trust it in most situations for photos and video. And if you're one of those people that love shooting their food for Instagram, well, you'll like the vertical video feature. The camera recognizes when you're shooting vertical, and it will upload it that way. These features, along with the other ones that I mentioned in the video, like burst shooting and slow-mo, are plenty to get excited about, although this guy's a little too excited. Let's talk about some negatives. If you're shooting 4K video, there's a 5-minute recording limit that the camera will literally shut down because of an overheating issue. But there is a way around that. All you have to do is go into the menu and the auto power off, just change to high. The camera will get a little warm, but you can shoot beyond 5 minutes, and that is a relief. So while the camera has a bright aperture at wide angle, it drops off pretty quickly, reaching 4.0 by about 40 millimeter equivalent. So you're still going to want good light for this camera. Otherwise, your ISO is going to ramp up quickly. Astrophotographers, look elsewhere than the RX100. Some older versions of the RX had a built-in neutral density filter. The Canon has one, but there's not in the RX100 Mark VII. None. Well, okay, we get it. And the batteries, while they're nice and small, they don't last very long, only rated for about 260 shots, so make sure you have plenty on hand to avoid disappointment. Now, the RX has some features that are both good and bad at the same time. I'll explain what I mean.
The camera's size is both an advantage and can be a disadvantage. I mean, it's nice and small and cute and easy to put in your pocket and discreet, but if you don't have some sort of wrist strap or means to carry it, it could be really a disaster waiting to happen because its finish is shiny and kind of slippery.
A third-party hand grip like this from UU Rig I find makes using the camera a lot easier, and it's very simple to attach right at the bottom of the tripod plate. You can get a clean HDMI out, but it uses the micro port, which is much more susceptible to breakage. It's nice to have the mic jack, but not so nice to have no hot shoe and no headphone jack. Shooting in direct sunlight with the screen is tough with all the glare, so that's why it's really nice we have a viewfinder in the RX, but you have to press a button to pop it up, and it's just an extra step when sometimes you need to work fast. But the image through the viewfinder is nice and clear and sharp. There's a variety of video formats from 4K to 1080p to AVC HD, but only up to 4K 30. But even at 4K 30, the image has great detail, color, and presence. So it would be great if we had a crystal ball and knew when the 100 Mark VIII was coming out, or if it was coming out at all, but we don't. So we just have to make some assumptions as to what might change, and it probably would be a little better low light, stabilization, autofocus, the more updated Sony menus and batteries, a built-in DVD burner it would surely have.
Just seeing if you were paying attention.
So who is this camera for? If you're doing street photography, you can be really discreet. If you're traveling or shooting family events and vacations, or for everyday use, it's a great camera since you can just take it with you, and you've got that wide range from wide angle to zoom, and it still maintains excellent image quality. You can even get away using it for wildlife, especially with the clear image zoom function. But if you're using it for long form shooting like sporting events or weddings or church services, it's not the camera for you. It's not really designed for that. It's expensive compared to the competition if you buy it at full retail price, but since it's been out for a while, if you don't mind getting it secondhand, you can get some really good deals, like on eBay, for example.
Wait for the 8? I don't think you have to. The RX100 VII is a great camera in its own right, but let me know in the comment section if you think there's a chance the 8 can still come. And don't forget to subscribe. I'll give you updates along the way if anything should change. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next video. Let's pop this up.